Welcome to the Anchor Your Retirement podcast. I am your host, Barbara Gullen, hanging out with my fun-loving and slightly opinionated co-host, Tony Shore. How you doing, Tony?
Opinionated?
I
Me?
I can't wait to
Opinionated?
hear this comment that we talked
Oh,
about leading into the show. That we said we're going to save this for the show.
yeah, our condiment conversation.
Yes, leading into me saying that my boyfriend asked me if I needed anything from Costco because he was
Okay.
today.
And,
Okay.
and what did you tell him?
Well, I said always raspberries because I love raspberries.
Oh, you
But
you
then
and me both. We're in agreement.
I was like, and if they have like the industrial size can of tomato puree, pick up one of those and I'll make a couple of batches of spaghetti sauce this weekend.
Ah, spaghetti sauce. Yes. I
You
wonder
were
what you would do
wondering
with all that.
with all that tomato puree,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, that the big can is enough for about 2 batches of my sauce.
Yeah. That's
So
awesome. Really? You make a lot of sauce, right?
well, I've got my daughter's coming home from boarding school,
Sure.
and we're going into the summer months where number one, who wants a hot kitchen? Number two, you want
True.
a quick dinner.
Yep.
So I will make up a couple of batches of sauce
Hmm.
and freeze it, and then we can pull that out and have it with meatballs or pasta. Hey, we had our first harvest from the garden this week. We
What'd you
had
get?
we got spinach salad out of the garden, and I have baby peas growing,
Wow, peas.
and yep,
Yum.
and the green beans are probably flowering. I didn't go
Ooh,
out there
love
this
green
morning
beans.
to check those yet. The carrots are about, tops are about 9 inches
Oh,
tall, and
wow. They're getting ready then.
yeah, I can see the little pink on the radishes and
Yep.
the
Nice.
yeah, so
That's fun.
anyway,
Oh,
I could
that's
geek
good.
out about all that kind of stuff.
Well, but my opinion comes in when it comes to condiments, and I was worried you brought up. I
Yes,
mentioned condiments, talked about ketchup and mustard, and then you brought up Costco, and I was afraid you were going to talk about. You were going to say that you told him to get some ketchup and mustard at Costco. I don't know who needs
only if
that
it's
much ketchup
no,
or mustard.
now they do a nice 4-pack picnic pack
Oh, they
that
do
has
the
that's
picnic
got the
pack, the
ketchup,
relish.
mustard, the
Yep,
relish, and the
and it's all the
mayo.
Heinz, which is
It is
good.
all Heinz,
Yeah,
yes,
that's good
because
because we were talking about ketchup, and especially if you grew up in the Midwest, at least for me and everyone I knew, all we had is when you go over to somebody's house or ours, we all had Heinz. I grew up eating only Heinz ketchup, right? That was
I
just
can
what we
believe
had.
that. I
That's
can
what we
believe
had. I
that.
didn't even know until I was probably in middle school. I didn't know there were other kinds of ketchup. And then it went somewhere and had Hunt's. And I just like,
Oh,
ugh,
wow.
like there was a crazy taste to me because I had grown up on Heinz. And I'm just saying, Heinz kind of sets the standard for ketchup. And I
They
just can't
do.
I can't go anywhere else. If you're going to have ketchup on anything, I don't have it on a lot, but French fries,
Yeah,
and hamburgers, I like ketchup.
yeah.
Once in a maybe hash browns, but I don't put it on eggs or
Ew,
anything else. Yeah,
no.
no.
Now, it's funny, I was about the same age when I found out that people actually bought spaghetti sauce in jars at the stores.
Oh, we only had spaghetti sauce out of jars.
I
Yeah.
come from a very Italian family. I grew
Ah,
up watching it get made, and it was like a process
ah,
where, I mean, back then, my mom would not buy ground beef because it was too expensive to buy something that they had already ground up. So she would buy like a chuck roast and cut it in cubes and run it through the hand crank meat grinder.
gosh.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Some ground chuck, homemade ground chuck. You guys are making it from
Yes.
scratch. That's pretty good.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then grinding up all the run and she would run the celery and the onions through the meat grinder after she was done with that too. So, I mean,
Interesting.
that was before food processors were a thing.
Right. I guess so. Yeah. Yeah. I guess it
So,
would be.
anyway, but as fun as it is to talk about gardens and cooking,
Yeah.
we haven't said a thing about baseball yet, although the Royals are doing an outstanding job, and your Twinkies are starting to catch up a little bit.
Yeah, they're doing okay. They're doing okay. But I do want to throw out just one more quick
Of course.
tidbit for our listeners and viewers, and maybe we'll get some comments on this. I don't know. Barb, I'm going to ask you, would you put ketchup on a hot dog?
No.
Okay, good. Mustard only on hot dogs. Well, or relish or things
And
like
that's
that.
assuming I eat hot dogs.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, you go to Costco, you got it. The Costco dog is fantastic.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. I'm just for our listeners out there, do you put ketchup on a hot dog? I don't think that's right, but maybe I'm wrong on that. But
My
Costco hot dogs are
son-in-law does.
fantastic. A
My
dollar
son-in-law does.
59 or whatever it is, and you get a large soda and a hot dog, and that hot
And you
dog
need
is
the
really
soda
good.
because there is so much sodium in that hot dog.
Oh, there's enough sodium to kill you, sure, but it's delicious. Their hot dogs are really good. I think
At
they're
least
all beef and
they're
they're
the all
big.
beef hot dogs. If I'm gonna eat a hot dog, it's
And
gonna
the
have to
buns
be
are
all beef.
fresh and soft. I love that. Now I'm gonna have to go to Costco today. All
Sorry.
right. Yeah, thanks.
Okay,
Okay. So the Royals are doing good. Twins not as good, but we're catching up.
getting better.
Good.
But let's talk about something a little bit more serious.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Read me those statistics again from February layoffs that we were talking about before the show, if you wouldn't mind.
The February layoffs. I want to make sure I get the numbers exactly right. I am going to pull it up here. It is, let's look at here. Okay. Um, in February, February brought the highest number of job cuts since COVID this February. And that is Challenger Gray and Christmas did a survey and did a study looking at the actual numbers and the
Mhm.
government supplied numbers. More than 172,000 jobs were cut in just 1 month of February.
Wow.
And February is a short month, by the way. So it's
It is
actually
a
only
very short month.
28 days. And leading the way were 63,000 federal positions. And they already know that March and April were higher than that. So
Wow.
that's a lot of jobs being cut, right?
And I don't think that those numbers are being reflected in the unemployment numbers yet, because a lot of those, not all of them, the federal employees had the option to take the fork in the road.
Yes.
And there are many federal employees that are actually staying on the payroll through the end of September, or sometimes if they were eligible to retire, they got to stay on through the end of December.
Yeah.
They're still collecting a paycheck,
Yep.
contributing to their thrift savings plan.
Yep.
So obviously, they're not filing for unemployment benefits yet.
Right. And if they took the early retirement package and federal workers, they're not going to show up on this position.
No, because they retired, so
It
they're
doesn't
not
count as
filing
a
for
layoff
unemployment.
or a firing. It's not a layoff. You weren't laid off or fired. You were
You
just asked for
retired.
you were forced into early retirement, which is basically being laid off. We all know, but so it is interesting, and there are a lot of people out there who, what if you're 10, 5, or even less years until retirement and you get laid
Right.
off?
And there
What
were
do
a
you
lot of
do?
federal contractors that found themselves in this position where they had no
Yes.
warning. And as contractors, they're not getting a severance or a buyout of any kind.
Right. Yep.
And, there are a lot of things that, and this caught a lot of people off guard.
It really did.
Normally you've got a little bit of lead time where you can cut back on that discretionary spending and make sure you've built up your savings account a little bit and all of that.
Yeah.
There it's scary,
Yeah.
and I would not minimize that for anybody, especially since we have seen higher costs over the last couple of years.
Sure.
Even if you had some savings, you might have had to dig into that a little bit just to continue to keep meeting your bills and making ends meet. The first thing I'm going to tell you to do is counterintuitive. And it's kind of like looking at an angry woman and saying, calm down. I'm going to ask you not to panic.
Take a deep
Because
breath. Stay
right,
calm.
because, well, when we make decisions from a place of a dysregulated emotion, we usually aren't making a decision that we would make when we're clear-headed,
Right.
okay? If you're 5 to 10 years out from retirement, That can be really scary.
Mhm.
It may be you may be thinking that it's going to be harder for you to find a job, which is a very real thing.
Yeah. Not
Um,
impossible, but it is
right,
harder as we get older, right?
right. Don't be embarrassed to file for the unemployment benefits.
Mhm.
But I do want you to remember that that is going to show up as income and they are not taking taxes out. So
That's true.
make sure that you sock a little bit of that away to pay the taxes if you end up filing for unemployment. And I don't want you to be embarrassed that this happened. I think with as widespread as these layoffs are and with as much attention as the media is giving them,
Yeah.
it's not the same stigma
No,
as
there's nothing to be
in
ashamed
typical.
about. If you get laid
No,
off, I mean, it was out of your control. It's not based on anything you did. And so don't blame yourself and don't be afraid to tell people because networking is probably another thing you should be doing.
it
And
is one of the most powerful things you
yeah.
have.
Yeah, friends are friends for a reason, and they're gonna support you. They're not going to judge you because you got laid off. They're there to support you.
Right. And you never know who somebody else knows or what they know
Yeah,
unless you put it out there.
networking.
Yes. And, networking looks different than it used to.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of it that's done digitally through platforms like LinkedIn and even Facebook groups. Um, I would say another thing that you want to do if you're laid off is you want to read the paperwork that they give you very carefully before you sign it.
Mhm.
Don't be afraid to ask for a severance because the worst they can say is no. You've already got nothing. They're not going to take any more of it away.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even if you can negotiate something like them keeping you on the health insurance plan for 90 days or something like that. I don't know whether your employer is going to be able to do that. However, I want you to understand that if you have to go on COBRA coverage, and if you have a chronic health condition of any sort, it is unlikely that you're going to be able to go without health insurance. Legally, your COBRA cost can be up to 102% of what the actual cost of the insurance
Oh,
is, and that includes your employer's portion.
wow.
So,
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that their employers are covering at least half of their
mhm,
monthly health insurance costs. What are you going to do about health insurance between, once your work coverage stops? You need to make sure you can find something
mhm,
at a more reasonable cost, and there are strategies available. And I know that
mhm.
you have a team there. You can help people with this. Rely on a financial professional if you get laid off.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Um, and, don't immediately cash in the 401k
Oof.
because there could be penalties associated with that depending on
Right.
how old you are or aren't, and that's all gonna be considered taxable income. If
Yes.
you turn around and get a job in short order, you're not gonna be able to put that 401k money back in most cases.
Sure.
However, I also don't necessarily want you to leave your 401k with your former employer because we don't want you to forget about it. We want you to be in control. More often than not, it makes sense to roll it into a self directed IRA or an IRA that you're working with an advisor on, simply because it expands the options of investment tools that you have. But, depending on the size of your employer, you might have an employee stock purchase plan. You might have the 401k. You might have a 403b. If you're a federal employee, you might be in the thrift savings plan. It may be that when you're laid off, that if you're in a situation where you've got the ESOP where they're purchasing stock shares for you and you have to be there for a certain period of time for them to vest in, it may be that you tap into those rather than relying in on pulling money out of your 401k, simply because it could be taxed a little bit differently
Sure.
depending on how the shares are granted to you.
Hmm. Yeah,
I
tax implications are something you have to take into consideration
Right,
if you get laid off and are looking for sources of income, right?
right.
Yeah.
So, that's when it helps to reach out to somebody like our firm. You can call us at area code 913-553-6222, or find us at bgwealthmanagement.com. We can help you look at all of the different options that you have for that income and maybe help you go through the budget and see what makes sense to keep, what makes sense to pause for a little while. It's never easy, and especially when it's unexpected. Um, you could be in a real jam. The other side of it is if your company shuts down, more than likely your health insurance is also going to stop the moment that company closes its doors.
Yeah.
And there usually isn't an option for Cobra. You may need to go to the health insurance marketplace, or if you're in good health, you may be able to get a short term health plan depending on the rules in your state, because every state has different rules with this. And that could be a more cost effective way to cover yourself. A short term plan usually isn't going to cover the regular office visits or the preventive care, or if you've got kids, their immunizations or anything like that. But if you are in a car accident and you're injured, if something serious happens and you break your leg or you end up with appendicitis and have to go into the hospital, that short term plan is going to do some of the heavy lifting for you and not put that entire bill on your shoulders.
Right. Yeah. So, healthcare coverage, taxes, where to find income, looking for a new
Mhm.
job, all hugely important. And of course, work with a financial professional.
Work with a financial professional and get some support in all of this. Um, it's it's never easy. I don't know, Tony. Have you ever lost a job before?
Yes, I have. Yep. Yep.
So have
Once.
I.
Once.
It's been a minute, but I have been at companies where there have been layoffs. I was part of a layoff once. It was before I was married, so we're talking many, many moons ago, but still, um, it can kind of turn life on its head when you realize that you don't have to get up and go to the same job the next morning
Yeah.
for some people, and it's my some on a psychological level. My advice to you is to not say why me, even though it's really hard not to go there, but to sit down and look at things and say, what does this make possible? Maybe you have wanted to become self employed, and this is an opportunity for you to take that leap. Again, it's still good to talk to a financial advisor, talk to
Yep.
them about your ideas, get some advice on what does and doesn't make sense. You don't want to get yourself into a situation where you're going to come out of pocket for a whole lot of money to start something up.
Hmm.
In fact, my boyfriend and I were out at an event last night, and it was at a vineyard. And
Oh,
we
nice.
eh yes, yes, and we were looking around at that and just thinking about how passionate you have to be about wine to start something like that, because,
Yeah.
the upfront capital
It's a labor
to
of love, right?
it is, and it is a labor of time. I
Hmm.
mean, you're looking at the vines having to grow for a few years before you can really harvest a grape that is going to be something that can be turned into wine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
it's If the next chapter looks different than this chapter has, it really makes sense for you to talk to somebody and find out if that next chapter is feasible. If you were within a couple of years of retiring anyway, you might decide that you're just going to take the easy route and just retire.
Yeah.
Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. That's true.
You know,
And
because again, healthcare can be a huge
oh,
matter of concern if you're
yeah.
doing this before 65. And adding, in your head, you're thinking, well, I'm only adding 2 or 3 years to my retirement. But your financial advisor is sitting there going, and that's 2 or 3 years of contributions you're not making to your retirement
You're
plans.
not dollar
And
cost averaging in. You're
right,
not getting the compounding interest for those 2 or 3
right.
years, which
Yeah,
can add up to be a lot of money.
it
Yeah.
can. You're with the maximum amount that you can contribute being north of $30,000 at this point.
Yeah.
2 or 3 years plus the growth in the market can literally mean a difference of $100 to $150,000 in your
Yeah.
nest egg, and that's before we're thinking about any kind of employer match into the plan.
Yeah.
So those 2 or 3 years really can make a difference.
Yeah, but it's not that it's out of reach, depends on your situation and your
It
time
does.
horizon and
It
your goals,
does.
and that's why I think the most important part of this, Barb, is to work with a financial professional and get a solid written plan in place because you have reports that you can run. If I lost my job, I'd like, "Okay, let's see where I'm at right now, run the reports on my finances, on where I'm at,
Mhm.
can I retire now? How much longer do I have to work? So what kind of job do I need to get? Should I work a few more years? Look for another job? What should I do? And making the decision on what to do moving forward, I wouldn't do it without a plan in place.
You shouldn't. And if you decide that you want to continue in the workforce after that, if we run those reports for you and take a look at everything, it's possible that you might be able to take a position that's got a little less stress and maybe a little less money and still be able to achieve your goals. But you won't know that unless we put pencil to paper and figure that out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's where you come in. And at BG Wealth Advisors, how can our listeners get a hold of you and your team there, Barb?
You can always go to our website, bgwealthmanagement.com. Or if you want to actually talk to somebody, call us at area code 913-553-6222. Select the option for appointments and scheduling, and Christina or another member of our team is going to get you on the calendar to visit with myself or Mike or Walter, and we will help you figure out the lay of the land and what makes the most sense.
Awesome. I think that's great. Well, Barb, great show today. Listeners, thanks for tuning in. That does it for today's episode of Anchor Your Retirement with our host, Barb Golan.
We'll see you soon.